Welcome back to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. It's USC Primetime Live, presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Crashlet Collier, joined by my co-hosts, Nolan Ezit, Matt Zemek, and Ethan Inman are unable to make it here tonight. Hopefully they will be able to join us again soon. But Nolan, I really want to, obviously, USC did kick off the spring football season today. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about something that I think we were discussing maybe bringing up at the end of the show, but it was made official, obviously, last week. But I do want to come back and talk about it a little bit just because, I want to get your thoughts on it. USC scheduled their final opponent, made it official. Well, the word was out there it was going to be San Jose State kind of this whole time. USC did make it official, and I do find that, and I also just want to bring up in the regards of Sacramento State was trying to jockey for that Week 0 game against the Trojans. So kind of want to get your thoughts on your USC scheduling San Jose State. Did Jen Cohen go back on a promise she made? Because I remember back in November in her newsletter, she said USC would play at least one Power 4 opponent every year and out of conference. And what does it mean for USC going forward to play in Week 0 and have 2 byes? Pretty much, I guess, is just give me your thoughts.
I mean, did Cohen go back on her promise? I guess technically, by definition, she did. We're not playing in another Power 4 school. Certainly not a Power 2 school. Well, I guess a bunch of Big Ten schools, but we haven't scheduled any out of conference Power games. I will say though, USC was in a tough position with how that whole Notre Dame thing ended. Like if USC knew ahead of time, hey, you weren't going to be playing Notre Dame. It wasn't, and granted, USC kind of had some insight probably and a little more than maybe we know, but still, it was in some ways a last minute development. So it's not like USC could have planned ahead, a year in advance. Hey, like Texas, we want to play you or whatever. It's not like USC could have done that. I'm not saying that Cohen went after the toughest competitor available. Obviously not. But I will say, Sac State would have been a really, really easy opponent. So it's not like USC is taking the easiest way out here. In a way, I think that really is just more of a selfish thing for USC. I think it benefits USC. It's like now you have a competitor that looks a little better on paper, is a little more respectable, but you're still going to kill them because you won by 3 touchdowns when you played them 2 years ago. So it's honestly a really smart move by USC. And I just, after seeing all the saga of what happened, last year and how, teams kind of got screwed over by scheduling very difficult out of conference games. I think we kind of alluded to this last week, but for as long as there's a 12-team playoff, why would you ever schedule Texas, Alabama, Miami? Why would you do that? So did she go back on her promise? I guess, yeah. But she didn't schedule the easiest opponent that she could have. And it just doesn't make sense to play Alabama if you don't have to play them. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't hate it. And I think USC did the right thing.
Well, I think especially you alluded to the whole strength of schedule piece that we talked a little bit about. And every year we get reassured, oh, don't worry, strength of schedule, we got you. Schedule the tough opponents. Steve Sarkisian himself, now granted, Texas did get smoked by Georgia and lost to Florida, who fired Billy Napier and struggled to barely beat an opponent like Mississippi, needed an overtime to beat Mississippi State. Let me be specific on that one. But Sarkisian did have an overall point of we're going to reconsider how we reschedule games once we get through the second half of our Texas and Ohio, or our Michigan and Ohio State home series. But I think I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying about USC and the opponent they scheduled in place of Notre Dame. But at the same time, it frustrates me a little bit because you didn't think it was likely. You thought USC probably thought Notre Dame was going to bend to their will. That's unreasonable to think. But at the same time, you knew the moment you're like, that Lincoln Riley said, shoot, you got to look at this. The moment Lincoln Riley opened his mouth and said that USC was maybe had to reconsider their position, I think that certainly leads to something a time where you got to really look at, like, it's always possible. So the way I look at it is, when you know that's possible, you got to have a contingency plan. And say what you want about Notre Dame, but they were ready for when USC announced, or for when that impasse hit. They were ready for when Notre Dame was ready for when USC said, no, we're not playing you. Screw you guys with your little side deal with the CFP. And within the hour, Notre Dame had BYU lined up for a home and home. So all I'm saying is, just because you knew that it was very much a possibility that you weren't going to get what you wanted out of it in terms of playing Notre Dame when you wanted, you could have at least had a contingency plan ready to execute the moment Notre Dame said no to your final offer. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about just Notre Dame. But in terms of San Jose State themselves, I think it's definitely interesting to see them schedule them, especially with now, I think it's now 3 times, I think, is what I saw Adam Bradford at Trojans Wire post. 3 times in 2021 when USC tried to schedule UC Davis, and UC Davis being an FCS, the fans freaked out, so USC turned to San Jose State. 2023, BYU has to back out because they joined the Big 12. So USC schedules San Jose State week 0. And now USC Notre Dame hits an impasse. You guess, and USC sits, USC schedules San Jose State. And I actually want to bring up some comments that Jackson Johnson is fired up in the chat. So Jackson, what's up? So yeah, he says, I want CFP to college football go back to a 14 playoff or realign conferences based on geography so that USC can come back. Jackson, I agree that we need to go back to geographical conferences, but we need the 12-team playoff because of the belief that it creates in making the postseason more accessible. But I do agree with this comment that you said, that even though I'm a Bama man, I'm still sad about ND USC being paused. I think fans on both sides of the aisle can agree with that.
Well, I also think, I mean, if there's a 14 playoff, USC Notre Dame is not going to come. Like there's more of a reason to not bring that back, because 14 playoff, you can't afford to lose a game. So I definitely don't think we need a 14 playoff again, and I also think no shot USC Notre Dame would come back with that. I do want to address something you said though, Crash, because at first you were saying that you made 2 points here. I forgot the first one. Remind me what you first talked about, because there were 2 things that were kind of based on each other.
I mainly
that I really wanted to address.
It was how like Notre Dame like kind of knew that's like USC knowing that,
yes,
canceling Notre Dame was very much a possibility, and you look at Notre Dame being proactive and had BYU on the ready to go as soon as that was there. And then also I think I was talking about just USC kind of scheduling San Jose State kind of when they've had a scheduling issue come up.
So 100% Notre Dame was more proactive with having that backup. I think that's for several reasons. First of all, Notre Dame, look, both schools, USC and Notre Dame, are the reason why this rivalry is not going to be played, at least in the short-term future. But I think Notre Dame knew that was not going to happen before USC knew. I think USC was trying to put every last bit of effort. Notre Dame knew it wasn't going to happen. I think once they got to that point, they kind of had a head start of scheduling something. But I also think it just reflects Notre Dame's overall stronger confidence in their football program to play a strong team, whereas USC doesn't really have that kind of confidence. And there's a reason for that, because Notre Dame has been a competitor each of the last couple of years. You could even really say the last 10 years, even though they haven't always gotten it done. USC is not that confident. So look, could USC have done a better job of having that backup plan? 100%, absolutely. But I'm going to ask you this, should USC have cared that much about having a backup plan? Because I think I think of every elite school outside of the Big Ten. So we're talking, whatever, Ohio State, maybe you have to play them. Penn State, maybe you have to play them sometime. Big Ten schools, yeah, you're going to have to play them. But any other team that USC could schedule, an elite opponent, I think the only team that USC would schedule is Notre Dame, because it's a rivalry. I don't think USC ever would have wanted to schedule another elite opponent. Do you? And I think that's the reason why USC didn't have a strong backup plan. They didn't want to.
I get that, but I'm just saying, I guess all I look at it is it doesn't reflect well on USC when you publicly say we're going to play one non-conference Power 4 opponent every year, and then also, and then to suddenly, kind of, not seem ready, especially when your rival then suddenly just puts their contingency plan into action. So it just basically, I just would have just liked to see USC, I guess, have been a bit more proactive in that regard. But then just maybe, USC didn't want to schedule anyone. But the moment Lincoln Riley opened his mouth and suggested that maybe USC might not need to play might not want to play Notre Dame, however Riley phrased it, it's like, that set off alarm bells to anyone who was just like, hold on, like, wait. As soon as that happened, USC probably should have had that plan, especially because I'm not right now at this moment. I have my opinions and I've made them very public before. But at this moment, I'm not going to say like whose fault it is. But I think we can probably all agree that USC probably got the ball rolling on this one because Lincoln Riley opened his mouth. And that's kind of why I more think that it's more on there's more blood on USC's hands than Notre Dame's. But at the same, and I'm open to debating that. But at the same time, I think when USC still opened USC talked first. And I think that definitely doesn't put you in a good light. And because you knew the moment you did that you could be going down this path, it seemed like you'd want to have the contingency plan ready first, which USC then, I mean, I'm not saying they thought it was going to happen right away, but they had a whole football season pretty much to get that ready. And then obviously I'm going to give USC a year pretty much, because when, it came kind of surfaced back up around the time Petros Papadakis started doing interviews, including one with me on Behind the Caution Tape, my season 2 premiere of my podcast. So interesting interview there. Petros is like very mad at Lincoln Riley, but I really think just when you just know that it's a possibility, especially as, it starts to heat up the negotiations, USC could have been better prepared is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just don't think USC wanted to have, I don't think they wanted to be prepared, because I think they knew that if they weren't going to continue playing Notre Dame, they want to settle for someone like even like Sac State. But I think they're perfectly content with this result. I think this is more of a matter of is this who USC should be playing, or should they be playing BYU? And there's a strong argument there. But if you think this is a good opponent for USC, I see no problem with what USC did.
Fair enough. But I do want to ask you now, Nolan, obviously the debate the debate around this conversation got a lot more intense in the wake of Notre Dame being canceled. And these discussions have very much followed Lincoln Riley ever since he left Oklahoma for USC.
Yep.
Allegations then first surfaced that he didn't want to face the SEC. I'd argue, at first I'd kind of argue maybe not, because otherwise I'd argue he'd be kicking and screaming and USC would still be in the Pac-12 right now as we speak. But as time has gone on, and maybe in part because of, I won't deny, obviously playing the Big Ten is tough, especially when you consider Indiana is a power now that nobody had in mind 2 years ago when they crafted the 5-year rotation that Big Ten schools are currently facing. But obviously, USC did get out, didn't play BYU in 2023, although that's more on BYU joining the Big 12. Lincoln Riley reportedly tried to, work with his agent, who he shared with Brian Kelly, then the LSU coach, to get out of that game. The Ole Miss series was canceled in 2025 and 2026, and now Notre Dame off the table. So a lot of big potential Power 4 opponents either were or potentially canceled. So does this also reflect badly on Lincoln Riley of just like, him not thinking that, or maybe being, scared?
I think part of it's him being scared, but I also think part of it is this is the reality of college football right now. You get to pick your opponent within those, couple games that you have before you start conference play, you get to pick your opponents. Why, unless you're in the middle of a dynasty, right? If you're a Nick Saban Alabama, you do whatever you want because you're going to be in the playoffs. If you're basically at this point, if you're Ohio State, you can do whatever you want because you'll probably be in it. 1 or 2 more years of top seeded Indiana, and I'd probably put Indiana in that conversation. But like we've seen, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, they're obviously not safe. They've got these down years, some more than others. I wouldn't necessarily call Notre Dame a down year last year, but and maybe not even Texas, but Penn State, huge down year there. Unless you're a dynasty, why would you schedule these difficult opponents? It doesn't make any sense. And I think we see time after time again, if we want to talk about strength of schedule, but if the committee and if the voters don't care that much about strength of schedule and they really just care about how many wins do you have, why should you care about anything else? So is part of it that Lincoln Riley's scared? Yes, because if he wasn't scared, this whole thing wouldn't matter. He would schedule whoever he wants. But basically everyone, other than like maybe Ryan Day, should be scared of losing to another team because anyone can lose to anyone. Like there's no clear dynasty right now. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think you're going to start seeing more schools do this. You're not going to see, so many teams scheduling Power 5, Power 4 opponents outside of, their own conference schedule.
I mean, the one thing I do want to point out is other than the Big Ten, the other 3 Power 4 conferences do require their opponents to play 10 Power Conference opponents. So the SEC and Big 12 all play 9 conference games a year. And it also require at least one non-conference, one non-power conference game. And one non-conference Power 4 game. I don't know why I'm bumbling on that. But also, if you look at but then also the ACC, while they're still in their transition, some schools are playing 9 games this year, others are 8. They're still playing a total of 10 Power Conference opponents. So either if you play 9, you play 1 out of conference Power 4. If you have 8, you play 2. So all I'm saying is with the Big Ten, at least the Big Ten is at least a step behind there. Now, does the Big Ten maybe have some leverage in the fact they've won the last 3 national championships? Maybe so. I mean, especially when you consider Indiana didn't play any non-conference Power 4 opponents and took a lot of heat for canceling a series with a home and home with Virginia, which I don't think is looking too great for Curt Cignetti, at least in how immediately say, oh, we play an SEC schedule, and then the SEC responds by adding a 9th conference game and keeping the non-Power 4 opponent requirement. So all I'm saying is just USC is going to need to find someone at some point, at least to look competitive in the eyes of the committee, if everyone else is doing it. Is that going to change anything? Or would we see all the other Power 4 conferences drop that non-Power 4 requirement?
I think you're going to see other conferences drop that requirement. I mean, think about it this way. Can we agree on this, that it is absolutely within a team's benefit who's usually competitive to, if they have to schedule an out of conference Power 4 team, it's in their best interest to schedule one that usually ranks at the bottom of their conference. Can we agree on that in general would help your chances of making the playoff?
Probably yes.
So we've seen the Pac-12 destroy their own teams, and that's why the Pac-12 is no longer a thing. The Pac-12 made the standing of all of their teams horrible when it still existed as it once did. So I think pretty soon you're going to
cannibalizing itself.
Exactly. And right now, because there's other power conferences that all have this requirement, maybe they're not cannibalizing each other. But what is happening is the Big Ten's getting a step ahead of them because they don't have to schedule an out of conference game. And I also think even if the Big Ten, let's say the Big Ten was the one who changed it, and the Big Ten adopts that policy. And now, let's say every school, every Power 4 school has to have an out of conference Power 4 opponent. As long as everyone can agree that having a bad opponent for that game to satisfy that requirement, one that's bad, is beneficial to your team. Here's what USC could do. USC could say, all right, let's play an ACC team. Let's go play Cal, right? Like Cal's Power 4.
or Stanford.
Or Stanford. And it's like, okay, really, like, are they powerful? Like, no. At this point, we're in a power two football system with an occasional, you've got your Miami, you've got your Florida State every once in a while. Maybe you want to talk about BYU, but for the most part, it's power two. So really, if we want competition, the Big Ten and SEC should have something where, like, the top 10 finishers the previous season, kind of like the NFL, they'll play that same corresponding team in the other conference. If you really want competition, that's what it should be. Otherwise, USC is going to play Stanford. Alabama is going to play, I don't know.
West Virginia.
Yeah, West Virginia. And then, I don't know. Someone could play, I would say Vanderbilt, but now Vanderbilt's legit. But you get the point. Like, USC will just play Stanford, and that doesn't accomplish anything except for a fun road trip. I'm down for that.
I mean, it would bring back the Weekender, and I mean, that has been something a lot of people have missed. I mean, I personally never got a chance to do it in undergrad, so wouldn't hate that. I'll admit that right now.
I don't know. I mean, let me ask you this, because again, I really think at some point, I mean, it's the management of every conference at this point has to fight fiercely for their conference's interests. Do you think it's going to be the Big Ten at some point saying, all right, we'll add this requirement? Or do you think the others are going to at some point say, hey, this is in the best interest of our conference to just get rid of the requirement? Or do you think it's just going to stay like this?
I don't know what could happen. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how confident they think how their confidence in the committee, which every year we say we trust them, and then we get very mad at them.
We never do.
Which in part, schools publicly do, but while privately, no doubt, having a lot of mistrust. And then they all get frustrated when it doesn't go their way, which, to be fair, is always going to happen. That's inevitable. But I think in part it might just probably stay the same. So we'll see what happens. I think obviously, really it's going to be the question of where college athletics goes the next 5 to 10 years. I think is the bigger question, but that's for another debate. But now I think it's time to get to our FanDuel segment, as today we will be talking about the USC Washington men's basketball game on Wednesday. Obviously, the Huskies are 6.5 points favorites. I mean, little shocking until you realize that Chad Baker-Mazara is no longer on the team. Moneyline -320 for the Huskies, plus 255 for the Trojans. And then the over-under set at 150.5. Nolan, what are your thoughts on these odds?
I don't hate taking USC on both the money line and the spread. I don't think Washington's all that great. Now it's interesting because I will and I do want to ask you this, Crash, for kind of what the off-campus antics are for CBM being off the team. But everyone I've talked to at USC is thrilled that he's off the team. And it's interesting because the whole thing was weird, right? It was never like, Chad Baker-Mazara has been, basically effectively released from the team, or Chad Baker-Mazara has quit on the team. It's just been Chad Baker-Mazara is no longer on the team. And I've got some sources who have kind of, told me some things that obviously I can't say on air, but there's a reason why people don't like Chad Baker-Mazara anymore. People could tell there was something off about it. And it's like, is Musselman this bad of a guy that he would just get rid of someone for no reason? Like, it's not quite that. So even though Chad Baker-Mazara, I thought just as a player, great to have him, great scorer, maybe not the most efficient, but just overall very strong scorer, USC's culture is going to be a lot better. Now, the problem is we're basically a couple games away from USC officially not being in the tournament. So how good can the culture actually be? But USC's still got some decent scorers. I think USC, wants to protect its reputation, and USC wants to get some revenge. I would take the point, and I'd take the money line too.
I think USC finds a way to pull off the upset, and I think obviously I take the money line, and I think I take the over as well. But I do want to just point out that, honestly, these numbers don't surprise me for 3 reasons. The Huskies won the first meeting. It's in Seattle, and Chad Baker-Mazara is no longer on the team. And I think you had to think, obviously, like as Ryan Karchi was reporting, it was not one thing, but it was just a cumulative pile up of things that just, I think when he just said he couldn't go back in, and then just I don't think it was him sitting just on that court side right there by the baseline. I think because he was doing that kind of throughout the season. Rodney Rice was there a lot too. I think it was obviously going and talking with fans. Doesn't look great. And it's just overall how he's been. I mean, obviously, that's not the first time that he has departed a team or been kicked off. He was notably kicked off of San Diego State 4 years ago for struggling with his academics, missing class, failing to show up to tutors. My dad went to San Diego State, so he very well remembers Baker Mazzara, and also very much, was very much kind of, still following his career even when he went to Auburn, and then obviously since I'm at USC when he joined the Trojans. So I think really this game just comes down to just how good is USC's culture now that he's gone. It seemed like if he was that bad, it had to be so detrimental to the culture that the coach just felt like they had no choice but to release him, because obviously I'm not disagreeing that there are people who, are happy I'm fully agree that there are people who are happy he's gone. I've kind of, got some mixed feelings, maybe because I've, met him, talked to him. Nice guy, at least I'll admit that. I'll give him that. But at the same time, I can see how just kind of the way he is. He's Chad. There's literally no better way to describe the guy. So I think I just think like with how he just operates, I think it must have just been so detrimental to the team that they thought, all right, we have a better shot from a culture standpoint to win games and make March Madness without him.
So I want to ask you this, because again, everyone who I've talked to on campus that's, relatively speaking, a USC basketball fan, or at least just keeps up a little bit, super thrilled about CBM not being on the team. Even before we learned really much at all about what happened, everyone was just anti-CBM from the get-go. And everyone is thrilled that he's at, which surprised me because he's USC's best scorer, or at least one of two best scorers that, have at least that are playing right now or would be playing right now. Have you talked to any, USC alum or just anyone that, loves USC hoops that knows anything about the situation? And is the sentiment still the same? Like everyone is just glad that he's gone?
I'm just going to say this. Obviously, Nolan, I was at USC this past weekend. I made it home for a little quick family visit. I had to get a few things taken care of before, my Cosmic Baseball tour, before Cosmic Baseball, which is why I'm in Virginia now, for those who don't know. Really takes off, and we have our first game in 2.5 weeks. I know it's irrelevant, but anyway, so I was back home for a quick visit. Made it to both the men's and women's basketball games this weekend. Sat courtside with Woohoo Sue. Shout out her. But anyways, just kind of the sentiment I was talking to when I was briefly chatting with people was, I think they were just kind of like, okay, if they kind of knew he was, a character. So I kind of the general sentiment was that it was a pileup of things. And if it was, that detrimental to culture, I think they were going to trust Musselman's judgment on it, I think was kind of what it was. But I haven't talked, but obviously I'm not on campus every day like I was. You're on campus much more than I am, Nolan, especially as you're still at USC. But it just seems like the way but obviously if, so I'll have more time to talk to students, fans, alums, teachers, anyone who might be monitoring the situation. So I'm definitely not disagreeing with any of your takes. I just maybe just for the reasons I mentioned a couple minutes ago, I guess that's kind of why I'm a little torn about it, especially when it's just this late in the year, when that's when it's obviously maybe you saw Gilbert Arenas' video, which has a report supposedly now been taken down. So I think it had to be something. It just had to be really bad if, they thought, all right, we got 2 games left. We got to pull it together now, or the season that's already seemingly lost is going to go further, further fall apart. It had to be bad, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I will say it's difficult to really miss someone who clearly had some on and off court antics that no one really liked. And he's gone amidst a 5-game losing streak where you haven't won in almost a month. So the situation doesn't play in his favor at all.
For sure, especially with the 5 losses. So USC must also be hoping that they can maybe get some sort of reset heading into this tomorrow night against Seattle, then obviously returning home for a rematch against UCLA. So now, Nolan, with our fan, I think now we should turn back to football now. And I really do want to obviously now talk about a couple things. So I want to start obviously with the news with just last week with the NFL Combine. USC sent a handful of guys there. who participated in the combine. I had obviously USC sent 7 players there. So really just kind of want to get your thoughts on just what you've been hearing and kind of just what you think about just obviously the guys going, how you think they're going to fare in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, the combine always like there's just always so much hype, especially about 40 times, and like it's like that's like half of the hype around it, which always confuses me. But it always seems like the combine, I don't know, it never seems to impact USC players too much. I can't really remember the last time I saw someone make like a huge mark on the combine, but I will say Jacoby Lane, his draft stock is really, really increasing because of the combine. I think that's because of two things. First of all, he's a way better player than his stats show. And obviously, like the main thing scouts are going to look at is, actually watching him and the film. But if you look at the stats and you see he actually didn't catch that many balls throughout the year, like his stats weren't great. It's like, okay, so I'm looking at his highlight reel. He can make big plays, but how frequently is he making them? You look at the stat sheet and he's not catching that many balls. It's like, okay, why is he not that involved? Like, is this kind of he makes one amazing, spectacular catch a game and then is kind of silent for the rest of the game? So I think his combine being as strong as it was, having, really strong 40 time, and just overall incredible athleticism, like I think is really going to help him because unfortunately you don't get much from the stats with him. Like, and that's kind of the reality of today's game. So to me, he is the biggest guy that's going to have the biggest impact. I mean, I guess the other impact is Mekhi Lemon. Everyone's kind of going crazy over all those headlines with his pressers and everything like that, which I don't think matters. But again, I think his decision, not to run the 40, very, very good. He's kind of seems like a lock and loaded number 2 wide receiver in the draft class. So again, combine just doesn't really seem to make much of an impact for him, obviously, as someone who's a number 2 receiver. And even anyone else, I don't know. It doesn't move the needle too much for me. But Jacoby Lane was outstanding.
I absolutely agree with both your takes. Was really, from what I was reading, obviously, impressed with both those guys and just everything that kind of happened. But really, I think just, you can only get so much from that stuff, like you said. And I mean, really, obviously, we're not going to see anything. Obviously, we'll probably hear stuff, they start working out and, analysts start drawing up their draft boards. And I think, obviously, both are kind of where they're going to stand. I think they're going to get really favorable positions. But obviously, you never know what can happen in the draft. And obviously, I think if we learned anything from last year, it's that you can never be too sure of your position. Obviously, we saw Shedeur Sanders. And honestly, I thought that was pretty warranted, especially considering the way he conducted themselves. And obviously, both Lemon and Lane are much better at how they conduct themselves in public. Obviously, there was that suspension thing at the end of for the first quarter of that UCLA game, if I remember correctly. But in general, the way they conduct themselves from how I know is like, generally like in line and, nothing that, would rub an NFL team the wrong way. And obviously they might have more slack than Sanders because they have the talent to back it up, in my opinion. A few other guys that, stood out to me, obviously, Lake McCree, I'm obviously, excited to see where he goes. Obviously, someone, spent 5 years at USC, really had to grind to, get where he was. So obviously, super excited for him and where he can land. So I think he could potentially be a good addition to an NFL team that decides to take him. Then obviously, I think kind of anyone else, Kamari Ramsey, Anthony Lucas, really excited, Eric Gentry, excited to see where all, those guys land. You got any thoughts on kind of the rest of the field of guys who went?
Yeah, I mean, so for McCree, I don't know. He had like a strong performance, I guess. But again, it's just, I don't know how much that changes. What was interesting to me was, I want to pull up the exact numbers, but Gentry, like, his performance was fine, but those measurements of being 6'5" and 5/8 of an inch with a wingspan of 86 and a quarter inch were the biggest or highest numbers for a linebacker since 2003. And that is the kind of, I guess, literally tangible that can kind of make a difference. Like, it's like the kind of thing that's a difference of someone who, like, especially when you get to the later rounds, because Gentry was never going to be a super high pick. But that's the kind of thing that takes you from like undrafted to, if someone needs a linebacker and they haven't watched much film on, some of the guys left in the later rounds, you just take a flyer on someone who's like a physical monster or a physical beast and just trust, hey, hopefully his work ethic's good, hopefully like the intangibles are there, because if they are, this guy is literally a monster. So that was pretty cool to see. I think that could actually like be the difference of a round or two, or just being the difference of being drafted versus undrafted. So to me, that was actually cool to see.
I totally agree. And I mean, while I definitely didn't exactly, think Rob Ryan was the right guy to be coaching linebackers last year for USC, he definitely nailed it on the head when he said that Eric Gentry is a unicorn. And what did he say? Has like lines. I think I was like, did my last one, but hell with it. I'm bringing it back. Oh, Eric Gentry, total unicorn. Get these lines for arms. That's my Rob Ryan impression. Like, unhinged, but in a good, fun way. Unfortunately for Ryan, my opinion, didn't really back it up with his coaching on the field, and that's why I'm excited about Mike Eckler coming in. I think, like I've said before, keeping Ryan in an analyst position, I think, is smart because he's definitely knowledgeable. I just don't think he's the right guy to be leading that room.
Hey, and then we get more impressions from Crash, so it's a win-win.
Nolan, you missed out during football season. Like, next time you had a chance, ask Matt or Ethan about it. I did one almost every at least every other week until the Alamo Bowl, and then that was, I think, my final one my live reported outside the Alamo Dome after the loss to TCU. But anyways, for I think our final segment of tonight, I do really now want to talk about start of spring ball. Obviously, there's not too much there, but just kind of want to, build on a conversation from last week where, Nolan, we really talked about just, mainly focused in on the offensive line with, Tobias Raymond, possibly move from left guard to center and what that does for Killian O'Connor. So I just want to ask you, like, kind of obviously, well, maybe not much coming out or much you've been hearing, but obviously you're on campus. So just what was kind of like just things you're hearing, obviously, as spring ball's heating up, just being on campus?
Yeah, I mean, so I know the only actual like substantive thing, I guess, from just from so far this week, was Caden Dixon Wyatt had like great touchdown, I guess, and just his overall looked really strong. There's been good reports from him, the 4-star from Mater. So great there. I don't think anyone ever doubted that the receiver room would ever have issues one bit. So kind of expected, but good news there. Otherwise, it's really interesting because I feel like almost with every year that Lincoln Riley sort of under-delivers, and I'm not afraid to say he's under-delivered every year since 2022. There kind of seems to be a little less hype like on campus, I feel like, at the start of spring ball, because in everyone's mind, there's just like, as sad as this is to say, I hate to say it, but like it seems like there's a less chance that USC wins with every year that USC doesn't make the playoff. So it's like, going into 2023, there was so much chatter, and then 2023 sucked. So going into 2024, a little less, but still, like, you were 2 years removed from that year where USC should have been in a playoff, and it just kind of gets a little less every year. It's a little calmer this year, I will say. But the one thing that I keep hearing excitement about is the fact that, again, this is a really, really new defensive coaching staff, and so we want to end up watching a product come August and September that shows that we have just huge defensive ends, huge defensive tackles, huge linebackers, guys that are ready to play Big Ten football, or at least resemble it slightly. Like that's the biggest thing, because quarterback, you got it covered. There's no debate at all this year. And then running back, something always pans out. Receiver always pans out. It's just the defense. No one really knows what to expect, but there's a brand new coaching staff. So let's hope they get it done.
We'll definitely circle back about some of the position groups. I do want to ask you one thing, obviously. Last year, for the first time, at least in that I can recall, USC did not have a spring game, or at least one that was open to the public or, allowed cameras in. And it seems like they're probably going to follow that same playbook. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't heard anything about it. But do you think that also is contributing to, the lack of hype around the team? Because obviously USC didn't have a spring game last year. And while you could argue, I think that, 9-4 isn't acceptable by USC standards. I mean, hell, even Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden basically said that message that USC fans had the right to be upset at a 9-win season. Do you think that's maybe also, contributing to, the hype or lack thereof this kind of, this semester so far?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like there's been an official verdict. Like maybe there will be a spring game. I think it might be kind of a game time decision for USC to figure out if they want to do one or not. But even then, I don't know. Like I never felt like I really got that much out of the spring games. Even when I went to the game in 2022 before I was a student, there were students there. It's not like everyone's going. It's not like it's I forget which school exactly, but there's one school in the SEC that takes this so seriously. Like they fill the entire stadium. I believe SEC school, and that tracks anyway.
Sounds like might have been. Is it Georgia? Because my brother was looking at Georgia, almost went there, but I do remember it's like the spring game was no joke.
It could be Georgia.
And then they had a baseball game like that afternoon and also like sold that out too. And that was like 8,000. So, but that is granted, obviously a lot different with with all those SEC schools being in college towns. So, they kind of are the big show in their cities. But anyways, but you're just saying like those some of those SEC schools are just like all in on those.
Yeah, and I think maybe other Big Ten schools are too. But the main thing, I know there's one SEC school that it's like basically a holiday. And then I'm sure all the other SEC schools too. Tennessee, LSU, Georgia, Alabama, all of them. I'm sure it's a huge deal. It's just not that big of a deal at USC. I really think the big reason why there's just not that much hype is because, again, a little bit of underperformance last year. And everyone's getting sick and tired of the same narrative every year. USC can't play defense. Granted, it was not as extreme last year.
Well, yeah, obviously, Nolan has it having some technical difficulties, but making a good point, I think, about obviously USC just struggling with defense for sure. And obviously, Nolan, you're talking about just, USC having, product with a defensive product that obviously was not bad as when Alex Grinch was there, but still definitely, well, maybe statistically as good. Didn't, I guess, just look as good, or just like it didn't make you as comfortable this past season, especially in all three of USC's losses.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, sorry for those technical difficulties. But yeah, I think if it was something new every year, but it got a little better, like maybe in 2022 and 2023 just didn't have a great quarterback, and that can really kill a team. And then the next couple of years, you got a quarterback, you got a strong foundation, but just a couple pieces in the O-line, and then maybe not the best development on the defensive front. That's a little more acceptable than just the same problem every year that seniors like myself have just went through the same thing for 4 years straight. And then, all the juniors have gone through that for 3 years and they know what to expect for their senior year. And the sophomores have been through the same thing for 2 years and they know what to expect next year. Like, it's just, what is there to be excited about? Obviously, as a huge football fan myself, I'm excited, but I understand how if you're not the biggest football fan and you kind of just go to the games, understanding a little bit about what's going on, but hoping that USC wins and they win 2/3 of the games, but they don't win everything, I understand why you wouldn't be as excited until it's the fall.
Yeah, it's completely valid. And I think definitely, obviously you want your football program to be good, but definitely, tough to, get people behind it when they keep hearing the same story. And obviously, while we're just on the topic of defense, what areas of the defense concern you the most? Obviously, you have a few coaching holdovers like Sean Nua. Well, a lot of new faces on that defensive coaching staff under new coordinator and Hall of Fame coach Gary Patterson.
Yeah, I'd say, just kind of basing it off of last year's performance and the guys that USC retained, the secondary really scares me. It's like, it's really scary. Not to say that I'm not concerned about the pass rush and the run defense. Honestly, like Crash, I wish my answer, and actually I guess that this is my answer, every position. That's my concern, every position. because you never know which positions are going to be the biggest weakness of this defense and which ones are going to kind of get it done. It's a really weird concept at USC. On the offensive front, every year, if a positional group or an individual player is a total standout, that's what makes that guy, get all the headlines. If anyone is just kind of mediocre, just getting the job done, they make the headlines for like, you are the guy or you are the positional group that's holding this team back. On the defensive front, if you simply do your job, you get praised. You get praised regardless of who it is. If you do your job, you get praised because every other positional group has flaws. Every year, it's the same story. So I don't know exactly which positional groups defensively are going to have the biggest holes. I think it's going to be the secondary, and I'm concerned about giving up big plays as always. But again, I wish I could just get a competent defense from every positional group so that there aren't any huge holes. I know that's not exactly like an answer you're looking for, but the reality is I don't have confidence in any individual positional group at this point. I don't.
Fair enough. But while you did kind of said you don't really, while your answer was all, you kind of really did seem to be worried about the secondary, which granted does make sense. And I mean, that'd probably be my area of most concern, that or the linebackers. So I kind of want to
Yeah.
focus maybe on those, considering those were probably the biggest areas of weakness. I think we can definitely talk about the defensive front too, especially with regards to the new coaches. We'll start in the back. We'll start with the secondary and work our way towards the line of scrimmage. So how confident do you feel, obviously, with the recruiting under Chad Bowden, but also just the new coaches in the room, especially in charge of the secondary, with obviously, the with obviously Patterson in the room, but then Trevon Reed and cornerbacks coach, but then also Paul Gonzalez now being the safeties coach and the defensive pass game coordinator. So where does can you kind of just give an idea of kind of where you feel about this?
Yeah, Paul Gonzalez I liked. I found one stat a couple days ago, maybe a week ago. I'm trying to find it right now. I really do like him though, and I think honestly, we've kind of discussed all these positional coaches kind of throughout the last couple of weeks as they got hired continuously. Everyone that was hired externally from any other any other program, I really like. I don't see any huge holes. There were no hires that were a real head scratcher to me. Paul Gonzalez honestly was one of the guys I liked the most, and I liked the resume of, and I liked the history of the most. But I think honestly, every positional group, positional coach, I thought was really strong. My concern is just not to be a broken clock, but everyone that was promoted within or just retained for that matter, not a fan of it all. That's who scares me. I am really excited to see every new hire build some sort of new culture. Hopefully a culture that Lincoln Riley just, says, hey, I'm not a defensive guy. You guys do your thing. I know he's not going to do that because that's just not what he does. But I'd love to see a new culture built within this defense, like a Big Ten defensive culture. We'll see how that goes. But I am really excited to see what happens with every new positional coach, because I think it was very much so needed. And some of these guys were taken from stronger defensive schools, not necessarily all in like Big Ten or SEC schools. Got a lot of like Big 12 coaches, but I don't see a problem with that as long as they've got a good resume. So yeah, I don't know. The coaches are not my concern, at least the new hires, not at all.
Fair enough. I kind of would say, like, obviously, like I've said, I think the secondary and linebacker area concern me the most. I think definitely probably have the most confidence, I think, to see the linebackers improve, especially with Mike Eckler now overseeing linebackers, and while obviously getting some assistance on with at least the outside linebackers, if I have that correct, with the outside linebackers with AJ Howard helping out, who was an internal promotion. But obviously, I think with Eckler technically overseeing all the linebackers and probably having a bit more focus on the inside, I guess I'm okay with that. But I think obviously you do raise a good point about obviously where, we were in a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation, then okay, then I could, then I guess maybe I would be more of a fan of the internal promotions. But I think when it's kind of like, there's clearly been some struggles and obviously you had an opportunity to reset and you don't, I think that definitely does raise a few red flags. I don't hate loyalty in principle. I think I think it can be very beneficial, but I think it can only go so far before obviously it can, cause problems, in my opinion. So I think part of it is I think I probably have the most confidence in the linebackers to improve, but I think in terms of the secondary, I think that one might be a little bit concerning, especially with, obviously, obviously I think, the secondary too. I think it's kind of more as you get a little bit closer to the up to the line of scrimmage that I'm going to be a bit more concerned, especially with, I think, at least of like the coaches who are out recruiting with I think it's Skylar Jones now being in charge of defensive tackles. So obviously, what are your kind of thoughts, obviously, on like how you think, the front set, kind of, front, like the defensive line's going to do, kind of the front seven area?
Yeah, I don't know that. So, I mean, the front seven was obviously one of, I don't want to call it the stronger aspects of the defense last year because there really was no strong point of that unit. But obviously, the front seven was better than the secondary, and I don't think that'll be any different this year. But Skylar Jones, I don't know. I don't know how sold I am on him, to be honest. To me, the hires that I really liked most, and obviously I already talked about some, but I really liked Mike Eckler for special teams because special teams was a huge problem that I know we'll have other days to talk about that. That's a whole beast to unpack here. But for the front seven, I don't know. I think as long as USC can stop the run in any sort of way and get some sort of pressure, I'm okay with it. I just haven't liked how competent USC has been with Sean Nua. He has not done his job as well as he needs to have done. Something needs to change at USC because I do think there's talent on this team that is never used properly, especially on the front seven. Secondary, it kind of seems like when USC has someone really strong, and once D'Anton Lynn came over, made good use of at least the strong points. I don't feel like that's always utilized with the front seven. So I do hope that's something that changes.
Absolutely. I think that is, we talked about, obviously, defense, obviously, a little bit of time, I think also maybe talk a little bit about special teams and kind of what we're seeing there. Obviously, like you said, you like the hire of Mike Eckler, Ryan Dudery being moved to a co-special teams coordinator in charge of specialists. So kind of, what are you seeing there in terms of like your confidence in, special teams improving, especially with, Eckler also overseeing that group?
I really trust Eckler. And because of that, I'm going to trust the special teams. I feel like special teams compared to an offensive or defensive unit, I don't want to say it like requires like less skilled players, but there are, everyone on the offensive front has spent 15 years of their life basically dedicated to that position, or at least dedicated to football. And, last 5 or so at the very least dedicated to, okay, I'm a quarterback, or okay, I'm an offensive lineman. Okay, I'm a receiver. Same thing with defense. Like you grow up playing cornerback or safety or linebacker, maybe even, with the designation of inside or outside that you stick with for like 10 years or something. But with special teams, obviously, it's kind of like midway through the season, you're just going to recognize, at least if you're a good special teams coordinator, you should recognize, hey, like, this guy can actually return really well, or okay, like these guys need to be blocking. This is someone that I should pull into our unit. So I think it absolutely requires a lot more skill from a coach than the players themselves. And I trust Eckler. And I also think you literally can't get any worse than USC's special teams last year. Like you literally cannot get worse than that, especially for a team that has the amount of talent that USC has. So this unit will get better. That is a promise that I can make for USC football, which I never do because I never have faith in this team to actually deliver on anything. But I do trust that they will improve the special teams. It's kind of like a backhanded compliment. It's because you can't get any worse than how USC was last year. But I do think that Eckler won't just do the bare minimum. I think Eckler will actually turn this into at least a competent special teams. So I'm excited about that. That's honestly what I'm the most excited about.
Good to know. Nolan, I'm going to hold you to that promise. And, well, technically, if it's hit rock bottom, it can't go any lower. So technically, in almost any circumstance, you'll technically be keeping your promise. But at the same time, I am going to point out that any haters out there who do happen to catch wind of your promise, your statement, aren't going to be happy with just slight improvement. They're going to expect at least, like, as you said, you're hoping for at least competent. So, well, technically you're going to probably clear that promise regardless. Good luck. Good luck holding up. You'll end up winning that one in the court of public opinion if USC doesn't end up improving significantly, which, don't get me wrong, I want them to too, and I have confidence as well. I am not going to promise that, but I am going to come as pretty much close to, swearing on something like Nolan. But I'm also, obviously super excited. I think obviously, Ryan Sairi obviously did a great job. Nothing really needs to change there, other than that is one thing I am a little curious about though, Nolan. I do want your thoughts. We've discussed it a little bit, but obviously now it's spring ball rolling around. I think it's appropriate to visit while we're on the topic of special teams, is what's going to happen with Ryan Sairi and Caden Chittenden. Because Sairi was a walk-on who is thrust into action at the start of the year after Chittenden goes down with an injury, and Chittenden being an all Mountain West kicker from UNLV coming over to really take over that kicking job for Michael Lance after he left and Dennis Lynch transferred to San Jose State. So really, I'm just curious, what do you do there? Do you kind of, respect it, or do you just make it an open competition? So I'm really curious about what is going to happen in that scenario, because it seemed like everything was really cleared up for Chittenden to be the guy at place kicker, and then he gets hurt. And then Sairi just has an all Big Ten years, just, has a great season, doing very well.
I know it's going to sound weird because I'm kind of going to say the exact opposite of what I said last week about having a competition where, we're talking about obviously offensive line last week, and how we thought that offensive line front, from left tackle to right tackle and everyone in between was basically set in stone. And all of a sudden it's a competition really. Yeah, it's at this point, because just of a domino effect, it becomes a competition for literally every position on the offensive line, just because of the domino effect that putting one person, to another position can have. And I didn't like that. But I think for kicker, for a place kicker, especially because of the skill that USC actually has available, it absolutely should be a competition. Sairi impressed me so much, especially for, again, USC, a team that has not had the best special teams in the past, and especially with kicking. Right before Sairi, USC did not have the best history with kicking one bit. Sairi impressed me so much. This has to be a competition, absolutely, and I kind of expect Sairi to win it. I don't know.
For sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Is Chittenden going to come motivated knowing that his spot is in jeopardy? Or
he will be motivated, that's for sure.
Yeah. Is he going to be motivated enough, though? Because, obviously there's certain things I've seen in sports where maybe it's more, I guess, with coaching examples, but it's like if someone feels like there's been enough disrespect thrown at them, they're going to come out motivated. And everybody sees it coming. So that's all I'm saying with Chittenden is he's going to be motivated this season to want his, hard to say take his job back when, I suppose he won it, but get it back or re-earn it, however you want to phrase it. He's going to be motivated to, be the guy at place kicker this year, I guess is all I'm saying. And I think, like you said, it should be. I think kind of O-line's one of the ones where I kind of I want to find my 5 guys right away and then let them gel and develop, especially based on what we've seen at USC, as well as like I've said, my conversation with Justin Dietich on Behind the Caution Tape. He very much agreed with that point of how long it takes an O-line to gel and get comfortable and trust, and for those guys to trust each other. But I think for almost any other position, I'm making open competition. And hell, if you just got to go week by week even, I'm fine with that too. Pretty much anywhere on the football field aside from that offensive line. Unless, of course, you have to make a change due to injury.
And I'd say of every position, place kicker takes the least amount of gelling, because there is one place kicker. Really, you just need to be, on pace or on the same wavelength as the holder and the long snapper. Like your job is simple. Be the guy who can kick it the most efficiently of anyone. So open up the competition. I expect Sairi to win it. Keep his job. I guess it's his job to lose, right? So yeah, I don't know.
I
I'm
mean,
Team Sairi.
I'm sure we'll see something on it, but it'll definitely be very interesting to, follow along with. And Nolan, before we go, I think definitely while obviously, we kind of don't have as many questions there, I definitely do just want to get your overall thoughts on just the offense in general.
Yeah, offense, I don't really have much concern. I think USC will have a better offense because they brought back Maeva, whereas if USC had Longstreet right now, would be a lot more question marks. But again, my concern is I think from the minimal from the very few snaps and just overall minimal game time that I saw from Longstreet, I really liked him, and I thought that he should have been the starter, or at least it should have been a competition this year. And because of that, I wasn't a fan that USC brought back Maeva. I wanted Longstreet in there unless Lincoln knows something that I don't, which very well could be the case. But you can't change the past, so we're riding with Maeva. I've got faith in him. I've got faith in this wide receiver room.
Obviously, here Nolan has its thoughts on that. I'm going to give my final thoughts here on it. Obviously, I think with obviously, I'm honestly going to take a little bit of a different path than you, Nolan, at least on the quarterback one. I think obviously with receivers, running backs, I think they'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with Wayman Jordan King at running back. Does Mark Bowman step up at tight end? I'm very curious to follow him, obviously, with how coveted he was coming here as a freshman from Modern Day. I think Tanuk Hines will step up. I'm also curious to see kind of what happens, who else steps up in the wake of Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane off to the NFL. But obviously, I'm going to disagree with you on the quarterback situation. I think Maeva, I'm not disagreeing that Longstreet was the future, but I think Maeva was going to beat him out again this year, regardless. I don't care if it was open competition, not. That was always going to be Maeva's job. I think he was always going to win that. And frankly, it doesn't matter because Lincoln Riley can, keep saying, oh, we're oh so close. Oh, we're oh so close. He can't say that anymore. This is a playoff or bust year, or I think I think Matt and I have kind of agreed. It's like if you're 9-3 and it's, very respectable, just missing the cutoff, he keeps his job. Otherwise, I have a hard time seeing Lincoln Riley being around here for a sixth season. So for that reason, Lincoln Riley can't really be playing, oh, I'm the quarterback guru. I'm this genius with these QBs. I'm not disagreeing that he is, but he can't really argue that when I think he's coaching for his job. So for that reason, I think he had to go with the guy that gives him that best shot, and that best shot was Jade Maeva. So even if he wanted to play Longstreet, that meant he was going to have to push Jade Maeva out the door, and I think it would jeopardize his chances to win now, and Lincoln Riley needs to win now. Obviously,
shouldn't this be about what USC needs, though, not Lincoln Riley? This is USC, not Lincoln Riley.
Very true.
Shouldn't their motives be the same?
I think yes and no, but also I think if obviously if USC doesn't want to have to start over with the coaching search, but then also Lincoln Riley, I think, knows obviously I get what you're saying, obviously, but I think Lincoln Riley can't think as much about USC's future, especially when the fans are also getting impatient. People are boosters, fans, everyone in the Trojan family is demanding results. They're demanding an entrance into the college football playoff, especially like I mentioned earlier tonight when I brought up what Chad Bowden and Riley said, where fans should be embarrassed by a 9-win season and aren't and have the right to deem that unacceptable. So I think when you factor that in, they also put pressure on themselves and on USC to do it. So I think it's kind of a yes and no where, yeah, you can kind of look at it, but at the same time, you have to think about not only what Lincoln Riley needs to do to save his job, but also what are the demands of the Trojan family. So I think that does factor in. So I think it's kind of a yes and no answer.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, hey, I don't doubt that Lincoln Riley's doing what's best for him. I just don't like the fact that right now I'm going to a school and going to be rooting for a team where the coach made a move that a lot of people disagree with just because he needs the most check marks in the win column next year. And the best option for the team, not objectively, but in the eyes of a lot of people, the best option for the team is the one that gets him more check marks next year. But he doesn't know if he can be there next year. So he just needs to do what's best for him this year. I don't like that. I'm not saying he shouldn't do that, because that's what any coach would do. That's what any person would do. They would make sure that they keep their job. I don't like that as a fan, though. That doesn't make me happy about the future of this team.
Well, maybe it wasn't the right long-term play. I fully support it. And obviously, you have Jonas Williams waiting in the wings, though. So I'd be excited to see him get his shot, though. And then I guess in some ways, maybe it does work out. Obviously, we'll see. Does Lincoln Riley use him in a way that rubs him wrong? I think even if he does only play in 4 games, I think it's still less likely, be as harmful, because Mayava will be out of eligibility. So obviously, it sucked to lose Longstreet. I'll admit that. But I think in terms of what the long-term play is, I think it does still kind of will eventually work itself out if Lincoln Riley can make it to year 6.
I hope so. He's a quarterback guru. If he can make it to year 6, I'm sure he'll figure something out. But I love that Longstreet guy, man. I think he's great, and I think him with Lincoln Riley, that's a team that can win a natty, as long as you got a defense to go along with it. But I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. I just don't think that should be the priority in an ideal world. That's all I'm saying.
Well, like I think I said last week, I'll say it again. College sport, anyone in the college sports industry is doing what is best for them. No matter where they are, whether it's individual, school, conference, NCAA, college football playoff, you name it. Everybody does what is best for themselves at the end of the day. And that's going to do it for us here on USC Primetime Live. This is the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football, presented by FanDuel. Thank you, everybody, for tuning back in. We'll see you all next week, along with my fabulous co-host, Nolan Ezett. I'm Crashlet Collier. See y'all next week, and fight on.